we think, oh, just let them be kids, eat whatever they want. But guess what? You just don't turn 18 and don't have a sugar addiction if you just ate whatever you want and didn't teach them how to eat properly and nutrient dense foods. So it's kind of like a, secret, hidden, healthy book, but it has chicken nuggets. It has all of your favorite things in there. And I try to make it easy so, young kids can cook most of them.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have Maria Emmerich on the line with us. She is the founder of Maria Mind Body Health and KetoAdapted.com. She's going to be sharing some strategies that she has used for incredible results, not only in herself, but in many of the clients that she works with. Having lost 80 pounds and reversing her PCOS, IBS, and regaining her health 20 years ago, Maria started writing books about the keto lifestyle with over 20 published books and more coming soon. She is an international best-selling author, and her new book, Sugar-Free Kids, has a foreword written by Holly Berry as well. I know you've been writing a lot of books recently, Maria. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Oh, it's such an honor. Thanks for asking me to be on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess let's start with a little bit of a background about your story.
Well, it's been 28 years for me. I was 16 years old, so you can do the math if you want to. But I was 16 and I went to my family doctor because I just wasn't feeling well. And at that visit, she told me I had PCOS and I probably couldn't have my own children. I had 3 prescriptions given to me, something for acid reflux, IBS, and depression. And I didn't want to take them. So I looked into what causes PCOS because that was pretty mind-blowing. And there wasn't the internet back then, but when you looked into it, it was very clear it was excess caffeine, sugar, and carbohydrates. And I worked at a coffee shop because she told me it was nothing I was doing wrong. It was just the cards I was dealt. But I worked at a coffee shop. So before I'd go to high school, I'd go to this coffee shop and I'd make the scones and the muffins and the cinnamon rolls and all the goodies. And then I'd go to school. And then after school, I'd go back to the coffee shop and we'd close about 5 p.m. And whatever didn't sell that day, I got to go home with. So I would have boxes. Do you remember Seinfeld? Yep. Eating the muffin tops? I was just eating the muffin tops. That was my dinner, right? And you think I'm kidding, but I would know what day, like Fridays, we'd sell a lot of cinnamon rolls. So I would make extra. So I would have some dinner, So I really had to change what I was eating, but I didn't want to eat chicken breast and broccoli. So I just started recreating some of my favorite foods like cinnamon rolls into like exotic low carb. Like I had this like totally, it's all protein, the cinnamon roll. That's like really awesome.
Amazing. And so yeah, so obviously now you're big into keto. I know you've talked a little bit about carnivore style as well. What got you into keto and carnivore and different things?
Well, when I was 16, I just didn't want to be sick. So was it called keto then? It was more called Atkins. What people know of today for Atkins, it's not the shakes and the bars that you see at the store. Dr. Atkins, he was like a keto proponent, right? The keto diet started for epilepsy and seizures, but it does help a lot with weight loss if you do it properly. A lot of people will do way too much fat and that type of stuff. But when you eliminate carbohydrates, when you eat a carbohydrate, it just becomes sugar in your bloodstream. A cracker, bagels, it all turns to sugar in your bloodstream. Even though it's not sweet, that's what happens. And I knew I had to eliminate those to get better. And when I did, I just felt amazing. I didn't lose weight right away, but I was so much happier. I didn't have acid reflux anymore. My IBS stopped. And the carnivore diet started. My husband got Lyme disease. My kids are 14 and 15 now, so it's probably 13 years ago. He just was having immense pain. And I said, you have to figure this out. You're only 40 and you can barely move. And he found out he had Lyme disease and he probably had it for 10 years before that. And by then, we were desperate. We tried everything. And I learned about, are you familiar with oxalates? Oxalates are like little crystals that are found in things like kiwi, spinach, kale. Very prevalent when they're raw. If you cook them, it's a little bit less, but eliminating those vegetables that had those and fruits, he didn't have any pain. So carnivore was kind of the way for him. And so I just helped, like joined him for a while. I wouldn't say I'm 100% carnivore, but more like ketovore now. I'll add a few things that don't have oxalates or the anti-nutrients in them, but I feel so much better without them.
Yeah. I've yet to meet someone who's, gone lower carb, let's just say, even if we don't say full on keto or carnivore, but yet to meet someone who's gone lower carb that hasn't said, they feel better, they have more energy, they lost weight, you name it. There's certainly something going on here with way too many carbs that people are eating. And I think what you said makes a lot of sense. And a lot of people don't always think about it that way, but like carbs are basically turning into sugar in your bloodstream, right?
Yep. Yeah. And at first, sometimes people have lower energy when they first start keto or carnivore. And the thing about that is carbohydrates retain water. And when you eliminate carbohydrates, along goes all this water loss. So a lot of times people notice like 10 pounds on the scale right away. And they're like, whoa, this is crazy how fast I'm losing weight. A lot of it is water loss. So let's get that clear. However, your energy goes without having enough hydration in your body. You might get headaches, migraines. And people blame that on keto, but it's really, for me, the carbohydrate withdrawal that you're going through. If you add in enough sodium is not the evil devil that we've been told that it is. If you add in sodium, especially if you're eliminating carbohydrates, that helps retain the water that you've lost, which is good. You want to have a good water balance to stave off headaches or low energy. If you have heavy legs walking upstairs, that has a lot to do with low hydration.
Okay. Interesting.
And the more water you drink, the more sodium you need. Electrolytes.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I actually just came back from some, executive program, and they had some, college professor with giving 1980s nutrition advice, as I call it, and saying things like, we all know, less sodium is better. And I'm like, well, depends on what kind of diet you're eating, right? Depends on how much you're sweating, depends on, so many things. And so it's still this old school advice. And literally he was teaching, and this is now a professor at like Harvard University who is teaching 25% of your plate should be grains, make sure it's your low sodium, all this kind of stuff. And this is the kind of advice we've been hearing for so many years. What do you think about all that?
Well, that's interesting because I like that you brought that up, because the university I graduated from asked me to come and speak. And I said, well, I want to talk to you about what my presentation is going to be, because it's going to be the opposite of what all the professors that taught me told me. And I don't want to get into a big argument there. I want you to realize that's what I'm going to be preaching. And they're like, yeah, we don't want you to come anymore. Right. So it is sad. And you do have to be open-minded. And yeah, I did go through that program, and I was told all the 7 to 11 grains, or, all the fruits and vegetables. And it's interesting because the fruits that we're eating now, yeah, we think, oh, they're natural, they're healthy for you, they have all these nutrients in them. No, they don't. They have a bunch of sugar in them, way more than what our paleo ancestors were used to. If you look at like a wild strawberry, what we were used to having, it was really tiny. It was about the size of the tip of your pinky. But now it's like huge at Costco, right? They're giant. Scientists have bred apples to be even more sweeter, grapes to be cotton candy grapes, right? The sugar beet apple, the Honeycrisp apple, they're all way sweeter. That's not what nature had for us. The first tomato was high in the Andes Mountains, and it was so bitter nobody would have ever eaten it. But now we make it into ketchup, and we consider that a vegetable for kids at school. It's just lies.
Yeah. And what would you say, there is some discussion recently, because it's actually quite interesting when we talk about keto, right? Like maybe it was 5-6 years ago, it was like, everyone was writing books about keto, like all the top, kind of influencers or people out there. And it kind of like had its moment. And now I can see actually the search volume and the interest in keto has gone down. And now people are like, oh, well, no, some carbohydrates are good, still lower carb, which obviously makes sense. But some carbs are good, especially if you're an athlete or working out or need to have explosive movements, you need some carbs. First of all, I think also that keto is very useful for people who have like issues, like autoimmune, keto and carnivore, because it's kind of like an elimination diet, right? For people who have, autoimmune diseases or certain issues, I personally think it's fantastic. But just curious what you're seeing recently and what you think about people saying, well, we need some carbs and maybe a little bit of carbs is good.
I would say, I guess I don't keep up with the search engines. Sure, it may have gone down on, like, I think all of these big companies were making like keto brownies and keto bread, which is just junk, which I never would recommend eating any of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, my business is booming, but I've never once paid for advertising.
There
It's
you
all
go.
word of mouth. It's all word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
This friend got better, they lost all the weight. I get, 99% of people come to me because they want to lose weight. And they were like, I've tried keto and I gained weight or I didn't lose any weight. I was like, are you doing dairy? How much protein are you getting? If you lost your hair when you tried keto or whatever it is. Most people, if you're doing it for weight loss, this is not, if I work with people with seizures or epilepsy, I'm going to have that fat ratio way higher and the protein lower. But if you want to lose weight, that's a totally different animal that we're playing with. I'm going to raise the protein and lower that fat. Most likely cut out dairy and nuts. And most people that try keto, they're snacking on cheese and almonds, Talk
Mm-hmm.
about oxalate load with the almonds, right? So I think people need guidance. They want guidance. And I do a lot of free help for people too. So it's not all about the money. It's just people want help. They want the true answers, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's where people see the biggest results is people that have had some sort of issue as well, or they, I guess have struggled losing weight or have some sort of autoimmune or some other issue that they just can't get to the bottom of. I've seen keto and carnivore have great success for a lot of those people as well. With regards to keto and weight loss, I'm curious your thoughts. Are people eating are you seeing people ever eat eat more calories and still lose weight? Or is it the fact that the keto, the foods like the protein and the fats are just so much more satiating that you're just not hungry and therefore don't need to eat as many calories?
It's a mixture of both. They've studied this, and your thermic defective food and all of that, it is a little bit higher when you are eating keto. But I do believe that. So when you're on that carb roller coaster, you eat like this giant blizzard and it has 2,000 calories and I don't know 100 grams of carbs, sugar, whatever. 2 hours later, you could have a meal. You should be full for that for a long time. But how hunger happens is a falling blood sugar. Even if it's high, when it starts to come down, that's how hunger happens. So when you're eating in a ketogenic way, your blood sugar is never going to go sky high like that. It's going to have little fluctuations. Your blood sugar is going to fluctuate with exercise, with sauna, with other things other than food. So it's not going to be a flat line, or it shouldn't be, but it's going to be close to a flatter line than it is when you're on the carb roller coaster. So you get hungry, but it's not that hangry where, oh my gosh, where's my lunch? I'm so hungry. Or you can manage it. You can go another hour or two and be just fine. Intermittent fasting is something that's very manageable and easy for people. And like you mentioned, people with issues, high blood pressure, whatever, keto's great for. But my kids are teenage boys, and they eat this way. And I mean, my son is the best football player I've ever seen. He's the fastest. He wants to be, what is that, the running back that runs and catches it? They feel better this way. So I'm proud of them.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At this point, it's their choice.
What about the way that so you mentioned like a lot of people did keto the wrong way and did Atkins the wrong way. And anytime you're buying a packaged good like a bar or something like that, we know you're doing it the wrong way. But some people might be wondering, like, and we've all heard of dirty keto where people are just eating bacon and cheese all day or something like that. But what is a good keto, like what does that look like to you, whether it be keto, carnivore, or maybe I should just ask you, what do you eat in a day typically?
Well, even like bacon and eggs for breakfast, to me, when I look at the macros, and the macros are carbs, fat, and protein, the macros aren't good for if you want to hit your protein goal for the day, you're not going to with bacon and eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a bad meal, but it's not something I'm going to choose. I would much rather have like a tenderloin for breakfast. I eat pretty odd things for breakfast, not really your typical breakfast food item. And they don't have to be. I have a breakfast chili, and it's basically, it's mainly all protein. People love that, and you could put an egg on it, but it's mainly protein underneath there. So you want to think about animal proteins. And I don't like to say you're doing keto the wrong way. You're doing it wrong for what your goals are. And so even like dairy, it's not bad for everybody, but if you're stalled and you're not losing any weight, I would cut out all of the dairy, the cheese, the heavy cream. Eggs aren't dairy. I get that question a lot. But, eggs have about 6 grams of protein in one egg. In order to get 120 grams of protein that day, you're going to eat eggs until you're sick of them, So I would focus on something different. I have I have this pudding made with hard-boiled eggs, but the macros get really good with what you put into it. And I made it for Halle Berry. And she's like, I'm not going to eat that. It's made with hard-boiled eggs. It was just chocolate pudding. It's really good. And I finally got her to eat it. And she's like, this is so delicious. She wouldn't let anybody have any of the leftovers. She wanted to keep it. But that recipe came from when we adopted the 2 boys. My youngest was very, very picky. He didn't like any type of egg. And we didn't have any money. And what's the cheapest keto food? Well, it was eggs, right? So I was like, well, you have to have eggs for one meal. And he wouldn't eat them anyway. And so I threw them into a blender and I added cocoa powder and some coconut milk and all this stuff. And I blended it up into a pudding and he loved it,
Yeah.
So you just have
Eggs
to be, yeah.
Eggs are my favorite. I do 5 eggs typically for lunch every day. Yep. I love it. But like you said, you got to eat 5 of them to get 30 grams of protein, right? So, but yeah, they're a great food. So it sounds like, and that's kind of maybe why you were saying kind of keto carnivore-ish, because you're leaning maybe towards heavier protein. It sounds like.
Yeah, but I feel that even some people on the carnivore diet, they can do too much fat and not enough protein. I've seen it where they have like a ribeye with a stick of butter. They put butter on top of the ribeye. Well, the ribeye has way enough fat in there for anybody pretty much, unless you're running marathons. Because here's the thing, protein is not a good energy source. Fat and carbs are. So when you eliminate carbohydrates, fat is going to be your energy source. But if you have hundreds of pounds on you extra, that can be your energy source. People don't realize that. But when you get lean enough, your macros are going to have to shift a little bit. You're going to have to add in more fat. Your protein should stay the same because your lean mass should stay the same as you lose weight. We only want to lose body fat. We don't want to lose muscle. That's precious, right? So,
interesting. Yeah. What would you say? I've heard now, there are a couple of carnivore people who are now eating honey or certain types of fruits here and there. Yeah. What do you think about, what do you think? I mean, honey is a really big controversial one. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are now. Honey is a superfood to some people. It's sugar to other people.
Well, this is all thanks to Paul Saladino. He never had a weight problem. He was always lean. So if you tell somebody who has a pretty bad sugar addiction, which happens to people, they have one Girl Scout cookie and then a year later they come back to me. They're like, I gained all my weight back because that one cookie just threw me onto a roller coaster. Honey can do that too. And if you want the real nutrients, more nutrients than honey will ever have, you're going to look into beef and organ meat. That's going to have more nutrients. So don't tell me you're eating honey because it's nutrient dense. You're eating it because it's sweet and you like it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, again, the fruit is not the devil, but it also is not what our ancestors had. We have changed it tremendously. So, again, he never had a weight problem. He's very athletic. He had a hard time balancing his electrolytes. And so if that's how he feels better, okay, to each his own. But I don't think you should jump onto a program just because somebody else did that and you think it's going to work for you. You know, again, he never had a weight problem. He's super athletic. He surfs all day long. Nice guy, but I don't know.
Yeah.
He was only carnivore. He was only carnivore for maybe a year. He was vegan before that. So I think you have to stick with somebody who's done it for a long time. Maybe he, just didn't stick with it long enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. Very good point. What do you say to people? Because I have heard also a lot of people now say, well, keto is great, carnivore is great, but you shouldn't really do it for too long. It's more of just like an elimination diet or something you want to cycle on and off of or stuff like that. What do you think about that?
I would ask them why they feel that way. I know that like they studied children on a ketogenic diet that had seizures and they failed to thrive. That's because their protein was really low because, protein in the absence of carbohydrates, gluconeogenesis, this is not a bad thing. This whole process enables ketosis to happen. My kids focus on protein and they're giants, so I'm not too concerned. But what was the question again?
Just people saying that you should cycle off or not do it for too long of a period. Like, yeah, do carnivore for a few months, but then you don't want to do it long term because then it could cause issues or something.
I don't know if it can cause issues. Your metabolic flexibility might not be what it was because you become a fat burner. I have become a fat burner. Do I miss the carbs? No, because your taste buds turn over every 14 days. Okay. So if you give yourself time, what you crave is going to change. Because I never thought I'd never want all my cinnamon rolls and muffins, right, from the coffee shop. I never thought I would be able to give up that.
Right.
But now what I can't have has become what I don't want. And that will happen for people too. So to be like, oh, I can't have a muffin again. Well, I don't really want it, But if you keep on going back and forth, I don't think you're ever going to get your palate to the point where all you want is the most nutrient dense food.
Yeah. I can definitely relate. I will say that literally, because I haven't, I don't really eat sugar or have any desserts for the longest period of time. And now literally, if I go to a kid's birthday party and they're handing out the cake, I mean, I don't crave it. I literally look at that piece of cake and I think, ugh, I would feel so disgusting if I ate that cake. Right. I know most people say that's, that I'm not like them and they don't have, they have a much different issue, but I think it's certainly possible to change what you crave and to change, your taste buds essentially.
I am standing proof of that because that's what I lived off of, and I didn't like steak. I didn't like any of that. And that's what I eat now.
Yeah. What are some so people listening now, they might think, okay, these two extreme biohackers, keto, carnivore, they're disciplined. I don't have that discipline or whatever they may be thinking. Just, the average person listening, maybe they want to lose 20 pounds or just, get in a little bit better shape. What are some, or maybe some experiences that you've had with people that you've worked with? What are some of the use cases where, hey, you should really consider this? I mean, we could say, yes, everyone should do it. And sometimes I feel that way, but let's just say, hey, especially if fill in the blank, you should really consider this. What do you think?
Oh my gosh, there's so many testimonies I have of you name it, like kidney disease. Just think like when you do a bicep curl, you're making that bicep work, right? Mm-hmm. When you eliminate protein because you think it's bad for your kidneys, you make that kidney so weak. Unless you're in stage 5 kidney disease, Other than that, I'm going to increase your protein to make that kidney work, and it reverses it. There's Twyla. Twyla lost 270 pounds. She didn't pay me a dime. She's now one of my coaches. She was at such a point in her life where she wouldn't leave the house because if she would need to use a restroom, she couldn't fit into a bathroom stall.
Wow.
And she's living her best life. She's out there ice fishing and doing all the things that she loves to do, playing with her grandkids, which she never did before. There's one woman named Jen who was on a handful of drugs. Like, I'm talking more than fingers I have. And she got rid of all of them.
Wow.
Talk about saving money and like all of that, saving our healthcare system, get people off of medication rather than reversing blood pressure issues, getting off of blood pressure medication. There was one woman who had us help her, my husband and I, when I say us. She was going to be on Naked and Afraid, and she wanted to win. So she wanted to gain weight in the most healthiest way. So she just had some extra fat on her when I should watch this show to see her on it. But so the most interesting people have contacted us for help. But there's one woman named Kiki who I used to lift weights with at the Y. And she was very quiet. It was body pump, one of the classes. And she would always wear a bandana. She came up to me one day and she said, Maria, I have alopecia and I heard that you could help me. And so she came into my office. I told her what to do. And she was a professor. And so I didn't see her for 6 months after that because it was school time and she didn't have time to go to the Y. She came back in May. She had her stupid bandana on and she took it off. She had a full head of hair and she cried. She said, Maria, I had my first haircut in 10 years.
Wow.
But you know what's sad? She was addicted to the food and she lost all of her hair again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why do you think people lose their, like, I'm not talking about male pattern baldness, obviously, but for people who are losing hair, particularly women, let's say, where it's clearly some sort of deficiency or imbalance or something, what do you think is typically the reason why hair is being lost?
There's a couple of reasons. It could be an iron deficiency, but don't go and take iron unless you know that you're low, but it could be one. It could be a zinc deficiency. Again, don't just take it blindly. You'll feel nauseous. It could be low progesterone. That's a big cause. Low protein is a huge cause. Low thyroid is another one. But focusing on higher protein is probably the key because most women don't eat enough protein. And guess what? Iron's in protein. Zinc is in protein. All of those amino acids like tyrosine and stuff is in the protein. Your hair follicles need that. And also low blood pressure can cause that. So when your blood pressure drops, you're not getting the blood flow to your head. And it's all about circulation when it comes to your hair. Your hair growth is all about circulation. That's why they have those hair massagers. That's what minoxidil works. It's all about the hair, the circulation to that. So having electrolytes is a really key part when it comes to a ketogenic or carnivore diet.
Yeah, maybe that's why those red light laser helmets also stimulating blood flow, right? Yeah, interesting.
My protein.
Very, very interesting. So what are some of the foods that you think for the average person that are, we know sugar bad, we know alcohol is bad. What are some of the other ones that you think that if you had to point to, these are causing potentially a lot of problems for a lot of people?
You might be surprised, but I would say like celery, potatoes.
That is surprising. Wow. Why celery?
The oxalates, like celery juice, can cause toxicity because the oxalates are so high. It can kill you. Same with, like, there's a lot of anti-nutrients in them that pull them out. Soy, if you're doing like soy milk because you think it's a healthier option, it's not. They studied women who were eating a lot of soy and they did mammograms, and the estrogen, they lit up like a chimney, and that type of thing. That estrogen dominance is going to cause, breast cancer or other type of cancers that you don't want to have. Estrogen dominant cancers are even prostate cancer in men, thyroid cancer, ovarian cancer, breast cancer. Like I said, kiwi, spinach, kale.
Yeah. So those are the ones that are high in oxalate. Is potatoes because of the oxalates as well, or is that like a nightshade, or what do you think?
Yeah, the oxalates and nightshade, but also tobacco too. That's going to have a lot of oxalates also.
Hmm.
Um, I guess it depends on what your issues are. You know, like if you're like Kiki and you have alopecia, I'm going to make sure that you're dairy free, gluten free, soy free, you know, getting rid of all of it. That's why carnivore is so great, because it's the ultimate autoimmune protocol. That's what we talked about in our book. We have a carnivore book. It is the ultimate autoimmune protocol.
That's right. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And it's so counterintuitive, right? It's like if you tell
Oh,
someone fruits, and vegetables, right? Like, what? You mean, what do you mean spinach, kale,
yeah.
kiwi? All these things are like all I've heard my whole life is that vegetables and fruits are what I should be eating every day. And it's so counterintuitive that it's hard for people to wrap their head around. And even still, it's almost common knowledge these days. People out there saying, "Oh yeah, vegetables are fine." I mean, nowadays, fruits people are a lot, kind of starting to realize that a lot of fruits are very high in sugar.
Yeah.
Like me personally, if I do eat fruits, it'll typically only be berries,
Berries.
blueberries, and strawberries, or something like that. But yeah, there's still a lot of knowledge out there about vegetables and fruits being health foods.
We could go a whole nother level and talk about glyphosate. And
Mm,
that's all over the fruits and vegetables. You're not going to get
yeah.
that with animal protein, right?
Mm,
But in this book, we have charts showing blueberries, kale, apples, and then we have beef and we have organ meat. And everybody thinks that if I put a plate of kale in front of you or a plate of blueberries or a steak in front of you, which one has the most nutrients? My
yeah.
mom still thinks it's a blueberry. She won't believe me. But if you look into the science, it's the steak.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I think that's the part people don't get. I mean, literally, it's crazy because I was literally with a he's now a retired doctor, but when I said, yeah, I try to lower inflammation in the body, like he was asking me, okay, so what do you think health? And I said, health is about, and I said, well, actually, I believe that health is about lowering inflammation in the body. And he's like, oh, okay, so how do you lower inflammation? I said, you lower carbs and sugars and all
Yeah.
these inflammatory things. And so he's like, oh, so then, but what about protein? Isn't protein inflammatory? And this is a retired doctor, and I've heard this actually a few times from a few different people saying, "Oh, isn't meat inflammatory in your body?" No, the answer is no.
All of those studies, when they point to meat as causing cancer or whatnot, it's all like this the type of studies where they ask people, what do you eat? And if they have a hamburger, that's the bun, the meat, the beef, and the fries. It's not the beef. It's all the other things that they're putting into their body. The fries fried in seed oils and all of the bread with all of the different chemicals we're putting in that. When you look at a loaf of bread on the shelf of the store, I worked with this grocery store manager who wanted to bring in more, healthy foods and stuff. So I went through the grocery store with him and he took me to the bread aisle and he said, I know we have an issue. And this was before I had kids. This was a long time ago. He said, I know that we have an issue with bread because when I first started here, bread had a shelf life of 8 days. It now has a shelf life of 14 days. And that was my kids are 14 and 15. Like this is before kids.
Right.
So we know we have an issue.
Yep. And so, what is it about meat when people say meat is the most nutrient dense? Talk a little bit about why or how it's the most nutrient dense.
Well, when you look into what vitamins and minerals are in like a steak versus what's in an apple, you're going to think that there's more in an apple. That's what I thought for sure, right? But when you look into the science of it, it has way more nutrients. The only thing that it might have less in is vitamin A or vitamin C. But I shouldn't say we all know this, but the lower the amount of carbohydrates you eat, the less vitamin C you need in the diet.
Mm.
You only get scurvy if you're eating bread and all the stuff that they were eating on the ships, right? They were just eating bread and water. Then they got scurvy. But if you're eating steaks, and the meat does have some vitamin C. The less you cook it, the more vitamin C you're going to absorb.
Mm.
So the more rare you like your steak or whatever, it's better.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look into the other nutrients like the proteins in there, your body's, your skin, your nails, your bones are sheaths of protein, right? So we want to keep our bones healthy, you know? People that suffer with osteopenia or osteoporosis, when we bring their protein up, lower the carbohydrates, they often reverse it. I also touch on other issues that can cause it. You know, you want to have impact on your bones. You want to look at estrogen. So this is why women in menopause have a higher risk, because you need estrogen for your bones.
Mm. Interesting. And what's your stance on, for example, seafood, fish, and, you know, everything is all about the Mediterranean diet, especially when it comes to this, professor, right? It's like, well, the Mediterranean diet's the only diet that's been shown consistently over a long term to increase lifespan or whatever. But I agree with you. First of all the studies on meat, right? Has there ever been a study where they looked at people who eat grass-fed meat, just, by itself, without the bun and the seed oil, French fries and the soda with it and all that kind of stuff? The meat is probably the healthiest part of that entire Happy Meal, compared to the bread, the processed bread and the French fries in canola oil and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, grass-fed beef. And it's not just about, you're going to get more nutrients in conventional beef, but when you look at the environment, you want to save the environment, you want cattle roaming the earth. They're ruminant animals. They're saving the environment. They're not ruining it, right? You know, when they blamed cow farts on the ozone layer, well, you know what? The ozone got better during COVID, and we still had that many cows out there. It wasn't the cows' problem making the ozone bad. It was us flying and all that stuff. But I'm sorry, what did you get back to? What were you saying?
We were just talking about the different studies that were done with grass-fed meat.
Yes.
Yeah, and the seafood. That's what I wanted to ask you about. Yeah, so like, do you ever eat, salmon or something like that?
Well, I live on the ocean. It's right here. I can hear the waves while we're talking. Yeah, I do. I don't like salmon, but but you want to focus on smaller fish. You know, the toxicity. It's sad that our oceans are so polluted. The larger fish are going to absorb more of that toxic. But sardines, those are great. Yeah, I do like seafood very much.
Okay, great. So seafood you're good with.
But the Mediterranean diet, there's a lot of carbs in there. There's a lot of beans, which are just anti-nutrients. No, there's a lot of issues with the Mediterranean diet. But I think it's, doctors are they get what? Maybe 2 weeks of nutrition in their schooling. They're not experts. Don't ask them about diet. They don't know.
It's true. I had multiple doctors tell me that they had one nutrition class, like 1 or 2 hours of their entire med school.
It's usually how much glucose to give to somebody so they don't die, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, it's really interesting. It's kind of backwards. Hopefully that changes, but yeah, this has been really great, Maria. What are I know you've written a lot of books. What are some of your most recent books that you've written?
Sugar-Free Kids, which is kind of like a secret keto kids. But it's really good. It's all your kids' favorite food items. Because here's the thing. We think, just let them be kids, eat whatever they want. But guess what? You just don't turn 18 and don't have a sugar addiction if you just ate whatever you want and didn't teach them how to eat properly and nutrient-dense foods. So it's kind of like a, secret, hidden, healthy book. But it has chicken nuggets. It has all of your favorite things in there. And I try to make it easy so, young kids can cook most of them. So I have a meter on it if it's, a parent helping type recipe or a parent, mainly doing it. But there's only like 2 recipes in there that the parent should mainly do. Most of them are very easy. So it's kid friendly. There's also, the carnivore cookbook was very, very popular for people. And they think, don't I just eat meat and drink water? But you can make it very delicious. I had so many recipes, I had to cut half of them out. My publisher made me, but there's so many different ways to make food delicious, and I don't know. I think food has to be fun. I love to cook. Some people don't, but I think it's a great way to get out of your head sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, look, we all got to eat more at home. That's one thing I can feel so clearly is like, when I'm traveling or eat out, even if I just eat out 2 meals in the same day, I
Mhm.
just feel like,
Yeah.
you can feel it in your stomach. You can feel it in your body. So the more we can cook at home and eat at home, the better for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Maria, where can people find you, follow you? Do you have as well coaching programs that people could join if they're interested? And who typically will join these coaching programs? I know a lot of people that want to lose weight. I would say that would be a big one.
Yeah, or people with, eczema or skin issues, that they want help learning how to do that. Or I actually have a coaching program, so you can become one of my certified keto coaches. I don't know if that's what you were asking, but I can't keep up with business, and so other people that are passionate, they want either a side job or make this their main job. They want to become a certified coach, and I help them with creating. I have a website already for them when they graduate, so they can be successful right away. Um, but it's all at ketomaria.com. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll find links to my free private Facebook groups, where like Twyla lost, like I said, 270 pounds. So you don't have to pay me a dime. There's a blog with thousands. I've been blogging since blogging first started. So there's thousands of free recipes, that free cinnamon rolls on there. But yeah, you have to cook it yourself, but it's totally worth it.
That's so great. That's so great. Maria, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I think people don't realize how accessible this is and how much of a difference in their life it can make, right? Whether it be losing 100 pounds or reversing autoimmune diseases, or people, again, not making any health or medical claims here, but we know people have reversed diabetes by using the keto diet and things of that nature. So there's just so many incredible benefits. And having someone who can provide you with cookbooks, provide you with coaching and support and all the resources you need, I'm a big, big fan of that. So just want to really thank you for everything that you're doing and the knowledge that you're sharing. And I hope we can do this again sometime.
Well, thanks for reaching out. You're awesome. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.